Well, welcome to the Stand Up America US show with MG Paul Vallely. And now here's your host, Major General Paul Vallely.
Good
Hey,
morning.
Randy, how are you?
Well, other than living in dictatorial, tyrannical Canada, everything else is pretty good.
Well,
It
it's
could be a
great to
little bit
have you
nicer
on. I'm
weather.
so glad. I'm so glad you got in touch with us. But I sort of have a pretty good feeling what's happening up there because I'm connected to a number of Canadians over the last year. But tell us your take on the situation now in Canada and how you see things working out.
Well, I think, Canada, although it's probably not the absolute worst place to be in the Western world, it's certainly not the best place to be. And I've been opposing what's been going on since April of 2020, General. And it became very obvious to me by the middle of April that this was not a health crisis. It was not an apocalypse. There was something going on, but it wasn't a health crisis. And that turned into understanding of the political crisis that was happening in Canada and indeed in most Western liberal democracies. But my thinking has evolved, and I think the evidence is demonstrating that what we're actually in is a cultural war against the foundational um, uh, concepts and the foundational principles of that the Western liberal democracies have been built on, and that is there's an attack underway, a relentless attack against individual freedom, against our foundations of faith, of family, and individual responsibility. And I've been looking forward to speaking with you because you're from a military background. You've got experience in military campaigns. I've been well experienced and in political wars and political campaigns. And one of the things that I'm seeing is, in military jargon, we'd use the term the fog of war. We see this
Yeah.
in all campaigns, um, and where there's confusion, there's disarray, there's intentional deceit and duplicity that goes on to gain the upper hand, and that's what I see happening in the last 19 months, now going into 20 months here in Canada, that there is the fog of this war is so thick that we can't even see who our enemies are or what their objectives are. The only thing that we know is that our freedoms, our faith, our families, our responsibility are uh, under significant attack, relentless attack.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I'm almost calling it the Twilight Zone.
Well,
If you remember the
it,
old series,
yeah,
The Twilight Zone. I mean,
I
how did
do.
this happen so quickly in Canada, so quickly in the United States? And we know it's been planned out for quite a while. And we know these globalists like Bill Gates and Soros, Zuckerberg, and these other European major bankers and players that meet every year in Davos, um, that this is by design, Randy, don't you think?
Well, you know, listen,
To a
it's
degree.
easy to point the fingers at some of the players that are involved, like the ones that you've just mentioned, General. Um, and and I and I think that's completely true. That there's a great many entities and organizations and corporate interests who are profiteering and taking advantage and facilitating this attack on our freedoms, our rule of law, and our just our you know, representative democracies. And
Mhm.
but I don't think that's a complete image. You know when I look at this, I also see that, and this may be worse in Canada than in the United States. Um, but I see a great many Canadians and a great many people throughout the Western world actually liking this. Um, and that's, I think I draw your attention to this. All these people, Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and Dorsey and um, Pfizer and Fauci, um, they would not be able to do this unless the populace was a willing collaborator in it. Like that, there wasn't. Um, and I think that we have to look at ourselves here as well and say, what
No,
has
you're right.
happened to us? What has happened to us as a society that? Because I was astonished, like you, um, that we were also willing to throw away and disregard our freedoms back in March of last year because of an uncertainty, because of an unknown. And as much as I can say that when there is a great deal of uncertainty, you should proceed with caution. But to throw away everything, our provincial legislatures, like your state legislatures, we shut down. We went into emergency panic mode. We delegated authorities to our public health authorities. We told everybody to isolate, to confine, to and to give up your freedoms because of an unknown. And I know, um, well, I found that objectionable, but I also know that if any government had ever attempted to do that in Canada, 5 or 10 years ago, it just wouldn't have flown, let alone. Um, so, and I think there is some similarities. I don't, from what I see, I don't think the United States have embraced it like we have here, but it still has embraced it significantly in
Yeah.
many states.
No, you're right. There's complicity with the population, a very naive population, a younger population, and I've read articles on this where they think that communism is not all that bad, socialism is not all that bad. Even the globalists think communism isn't that bad, as long as you link it to capitalism, like we saw happened in China. They took communists to the nth degree, but then they brought in capitalism with the formation of their companies, industrial base, and so on. Same thing with the Russians. And so, but
No,
hopefully we have an awakening. I think we have an awakening in the country now. We find a lot of parents are standing up to these school boards that are teaching the critical race theory and pornography down to our grade school level. What I'm really concerned about, more than anything, though, Randy, is our military. We have a lot of military now that they're rebelling against the vax. Pilots, Navy SEALs, but yet we have four-star generals and admirals that are trying to shove that down their throats, and basically either you get vaxxed or you can leave the service. Look what that's doing. You got to know
no,
that Xi Jinping out of China is looking at the weakening of America. We look at the lack of confidence many of our allies have in the United States when they saw the surrender in Afghanistan. And so, being a West Point graduate and having grown up in a military disciplined environment where duty, honor, country is that's what it's about.
well, listen,
But
I think
you have a
there's
different system. You don't have a constitution up there, and you have provinces. Can you explain a little bit to the American people how that's working, or are they all bowing to Ottawa for everything, or do we have some independent provincial governors up there that could stand on their own?
well, our federation or confederation is modeled very similarly to the Americans. Our provinces are similar with similar jurisdictions to the American states. We call our a head of the executive in our provinces premier instead of governor, but it's there's more similarities than dissimilarities, and we have a robust constitution that sets out those defined jurisdictions, much like your constitution. What we've seen happen, and I think this is similar to, again, not to the same degree in the United States, but we have seen that none of our elected representatives, or very, very few, certainly none of our executives, the premier or the prime minister, have the courage or the fortitude to uphold our Constitution, to uphold the rule of law. And when there is no integrity behind a Constitution or a statute, it becomes just a meaningless piece of paper. That if you do not have institutions or elected representatives who will uphold the Constitution, then you don't have one. You just have a piece of paper with some ink on it. And
Yeah,
and I would
same
go
thing
back
here.
to,
Same thing we're going through.
yeah, yeah. But I would also go back, this looks eerily the same to me, as I've been in elected office for 15 years now, and the intermingling and commingling between the corporate world and the public world is so extensive. Like I would say to you and your audience, General, that in most of our provinces, there is never a piece of legislation advanced or adopted that doesn't have its roots, its motivation, and its impetus from the corporate world. Like our legislatures, our parliaments have become seamless with the corporate world, and this looks eerily like Mussolini's fascist Italy more than anything, and which also has very strong parallels with the Communist Chinese Party as well. And and I would say that what we've seen, we have educated here in Canada, and I think mostly of the West, for the last 40 years, for males, especially males, but to be timid, to be weak, to be passive. We've used that term toxic masculinity, that if a young man demonstrates masculine behavior, it should be viewed as toxic. And we've started that program a long time ago. And now a great many of those people who have been educated through that process, and I could add in many other elements to reinforce this idea, but and Professor Jonathan Haidt in the United States did a great book called the Coddling of the American Mind, that we have actually a very weak, timid, and passive society now that does not know how to stand up, that does not know how to fight back, who views conformity and obedience as virtuous rather than individualism, self-reliance,
Yeah, just
independence.
look at the cancel culture, Randy.
Yeah,
Look
yeah,
at this cancel culture. People in corporations who you think are leaders, as soon as they get canceled out or get challenged, they quit, they resign,
yeah,
they
yeah.
don't fight. So, I mean, I agree with you 100% what you're saying.
Yeah. So I think this has been, again, if I was to use a military metaphor or analogy, General, I would say that, Western culture has been under siege for a great many decades, and it's undermined our foundations and our fortifications of what
No
it
doubt about
is
it.
to be a free person in a free country, and as you said, we see this oftentimes in Canada now, that there's a great number of people in Canada, and I'm loath to say this, and I hate to recognize this, but they see communist China as a better ally than our cousins and brothers in the United States. Um,
Yes,
you
I've
know,
heard that.
we even had our prime minister um, state that he admires the
Yes.
efficiency of the Communist Chinese Party. Um,
Hmm.
uh, and these are, so let's not be surprised. Now again, I could point the finger at him and blame him, but he wouldn't be there if a great many Canadians didn't vote for him.
Hmm.
So, like that's it's same. You guys have the same problem
Yeah.
with Sleepy Joe. He wouldn't be there.
Sleepy Joe's getting sleepier, Randy. Sleepier Joe's getting sleepier every day by. Oh man,
like
I mean
like
we're in bad shape, and then we have Kamala. She's um, I don't know what's
you know,
between her two ears, but certainly
well,
not much gray matter.
you know.
I mean we're
So
in
even
sad shape.
absolutely, the Western world does not have political leadership. Period. And
Period.
how did
Look at
we ever?
Macron. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like how did we ever allow somebody of Sleepy Joe's qualities and attributes and characteristics, like growing up as a child, and growing up when I did, a person like that wouldn't have been able to get more than his own family to vote for him for elected
He'd have been
office.
laughed away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and but the same applies here with Justin Trudeau. The man has no substance. There is no um, there's no leadership skill there at all. Um, he does have some name recognition, a significant name recognition, but he's an empty vessel. The only difference between him and Joe is, besides the age, is maybe the color of their hair. Like they're both empty of any leadership skills whatsoever.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Well, we're suffering the same thing. If we look at our Congress, um, they're looking to 2022, 2024, everything's going to change. But we haven't cleaned up all the problems that we had with the 2020 elections in many states, uh,
Yeah,
with the hacking of the voting machines and so on. We
yeah,
haven't cleaned that up. And we have these congressmen, senators. Well, we're going to turn everything around in 2022, 2024. I'm saying the Democrats in the United States are going to ensure that we have no Republicans that are going to be elected. That's their goal. One party system.
well, I think that's clear that because if you can only have one party perspective, if you can only have one public opinion, if and we're seeing this in spades in the last 20 months, General, is there is only one dogma that is permitted. So if there is only one narrative, one dogma that is permitted, and anybody who counters it will be canceled, then why would you ever have more than one political party to advance it? And that's what people need to realize, um, is that um, when dissent becomes unlawful, as it has, um, when dissent becomes offensive, like it has, then then democracy is over. It's that is you know in Canada, we use the term parliament, and that comes from derived from the French word to parler, to speak. Um,
Mhm.
and we can see in our society, to speak is dangerous. To be honest, to be truthful, is more dangerous than anything. And
Yeah.
uh, you know,
I can
so it's a
remember when the Canadian broadcasting system, Randy, several years ago, started canceling out people
yeah.
and two views, and that did happen. Let me ask you. We have this racist thing going on in America now, and blaming the whites for everything, and tearing down all our historic statues and all that. Do you have any problem like that in Canada?
Oh, absolutely. Like it's been. and again, this is why I use the term a war on our culture. Earlier this year, we saw a statue of Queen Victoria pulled down from this provincial legislature in Manitoba. We have one of the individuals who was the architect of our public education system, and he modeled our public education system much along the lines of Thomas Jefferson's ideals. And the university where his statue was at was busted down and the head cut off the statue. And the first prime minister of Canada, Sir John A. Macdonald, his statue has been boarded up and hidden at the Ontario legislature for a year now or more. And
Wow.
and here's one other really, really a point that I think drives home this war on our culture. So I believe it was in June of this year, there was a communal grave found at an old Indigenous residential school that we had for 100 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And there was unmarked graves in a cemetery at this residential school, and they were found, and of course, the media immediately jumped on these unmarked graves as an indication of mass murder by our forefathers.
I remember that.
And
I remember that.
Our flags have been flying at half mast since, General. And I'll just say to your audience, Canada was unique in its treatment and its history with our Indigenous people.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
We didn't have the battles, and there was no Battle of the Little Bighorn here in Canada. There was no George Custer. Not that we were perfect by any means, but all of our arrangements with the Native people in Canada were done through treaty and through settlements and through agreements. And we never had any wars. We never had any battles. We never.
Randy, we're run out of time.
But we're ashamed. But we're ashamed of our history, and I think that's what is happening in the States as well.
It's the shaming of Canada and the United States. But Randy, could we get you back on every couple of weeks and get an update?
I'd love to chat anytime.
Well, listen, I've enjoyed it, and I'm so glad you called me. And we've had a great coverage of what's going on in Canada and the U.S. So, listen, thank you very much, and let's stay in touch, and we'll get you back on.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, Randy.
Okay, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.